As we did with the previous practicum question, we're going to work something a little different. Today's video comes in two parts. The first, which you're watching now, is concerned with history. The second is a practical ritual you can do at home and follow along whenever you need it. The question prompt for this working is warding work. Provide and explain one example of warding or protection magic from an Indo-European culture and write an ADF-style warding working based on that example. So today we're going to do the first part of this question. We're going to cover 3 or 4 different types of warding magic from different cultures, and then I'll be recording a second video, which you can find a link to in the video description or transcript, and you can go watch that and follow along and see how I took the practice from historical example to modern rite. So this question is, like all these practical questions, at its most basic, how do you translate historical methods into modern magic? Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Most ADF members doing this will use some version of the core order of ritual, but some might get more ceremonial or dive into the background for a different way of looking at it. Your magical style is yours though, so you get to decide how it goes. The trick is to look at the boundaries of the core order of ritual. To make it an ADF style rite mostly means to craft a ritual that deals with a tripartite cosmos, relies on relationships with the spirits, and involves some dialogue with them, all while avoiding being crafted with the features from the list of items that ADF rituals do not include. In most of the questions, we've had the opportunity to attack the question in different ways. Here, however, we're going to have to study up on a warding process and work from there. All the practicum questions are like this, so this is just how I've decided to manage it. I'll outline several different options from different cultures before I settle on to one type of warding to discuss and develop a ritual for. To preface this discussion, it is worth noting that in order to talk about warding in the ancient world, I'm going to speak extensively about the evil eye. Known throughout the ancient world, our modern concept of the evil eye is both the name of what is warded against and also often the name of the thing that does the warding. Other items or other names include Mati and Malocchio. A lot of cultures give power to those who are envious, allowing them to do evil or curse others merely through the power of that envy. It's not often characterized as intentional and may even be accidental, but sometimes it is intentional. A lot of warding spell work focuses heavily on averting, avoiding, or stopping this particular form of magic, so when we discuss the concept of warding, it has to be part of the conversation. When we think about warding in a modern context, though, the idea of drawing symbols that are filled with power is a common trope. The reason for this is that it's also a common process in magic throughout history, and particularly the late grimoire traditions that Hollywood likes to derive their work from. So we're going to start with a process exemplified in one of the Icelandic grimoires from the 17th century, Galdrikver, whose original scribe is unknown. Most of the book is apotropaic, meaning that it is highly concerned with averting evil and warding off bad things. The particular spell that we'll focus on is on the back of page 12, and a basic translation by Christopher Smith is as follows. These 4 symbols guard against all magic from all 4 directions of the world, and bear them on thee. Then, drawn out are the 4 symbols, which I have reproduced here for your viewing pleasure and possible use. You can also find a file attached if you're watching this on Patreon, of course. The instruction here is fairly clear. Take these 4 symbols and carry them, or possibly draw them on your body, and no matter what direction the magic might come from, you will be guarded from it. I could see a person carving them into a 4-sided piece of wood and slipping that into their pocket. And indeed, I've created such a talisman to sell at the Magical Druid because I like the idea so much. But most people would likely simply draw the symbols on a sheet of parchment or vellum and carry it, warding their way through the world. One could even tattoo it on them if they really wanted to. When we go to do our warding working in the next video, we'll be working this concept into a modern magical context, crafting it as my 3x3 warding working. Of course, it's important to note that this style of warding is far older. You can find it in the Greek magical papyri, where characteres are combined to form amulets, or the charm to restrain anger, or the phylactery to guard against daimones and phantasms. In these examples, signs and symbols are drawn around magical words and barbarous names. They're written on tin, silver, gold, or papyrus, and then carried for protection from these specific items or concerns. One very common process for warding is the use of a nazar or mati, most commonly called in English an evil eye amulet. Plutarch speaks of these in the Moralia, in Table Talk Problem 7, saying that the anti-evil eye talismans draw off the gaze by their bizarreness, so that it rests less upon those who are affected by it. In the Aegean portion of the Mediterranean, blue-eyed folks, like myself, were rare, and as such, they were considered likely to bestow the evil eye. And the most common apotropaic image of that area is a stylized blue eye that can be produced as beads, necklaces, and keychains. I'm not wearing my keys, but I usually have one on. These deflect the envy and curses cast, intentional or unintentional, through sympathy. Sympathy is the concept that things that are alike have magical connections. These connections can be exploited by the magician to ward against evils, which is what they're connected with, or what they're concerned with today. When the evil eye is delivered, as Lucretius says in Of Natural Witchcraft for Love, by venom strained through the eyes, it makes good sense to deliver the remedy through an eye-like image as well. Pliny tells us that in the Forum in Rome, the statues of satyrs were specifically consecrated, rather than all the statues, to ward off the effects of the evil eye. These statues were designed to bring to mind the wilderness and the wildness of the outer lands, the uncontrolled spaces beyond the boundaries of the city. Certainly, the evil eye is something ancient, uncontrolled, and frightening to good, civilized people of the city. So it is natural that these particular statues of ancient, uncontrolled beings would ward off the evil eye if consecrated to do just that. So, sometimes it's form, sometimes it's function, but often it's sympathy. In ancient Greece, the head or figure of the Gorgon, with exaggerated features and fangs, was a common averter of evil. You find this on Athena's aegis and Agamemnon's shield, but also above doors and on coins and tombstones. Genitalia and images of genitals are also common sympathetic wardings as well. We know that the Romans used apotropaic images of winged penises to counteract evil. These were called fascinum, from which we derive the word fascinate, and were designed to protect people, particularly children, but also victorious generals. One was said to be slung beneath the chariot during triumphal parades. Pliny describes it as the medicus invidiae, or the doctor of envy. They are considered to be images of the divine phallus, thus the wings that you often see on them, and provide protection through that divine connection. There's even a fascinating image of a penis ejaculating into the eye at Leptis Magna in northern Libya. The idea here is that one could cover up the offending eye with sexual fluids and thereby avert its impact on you. One can, in effect, blind the eye of envy with this sort of apotropaic display. But genital images as wardings extend beyond the Roman world, and the next best known wardings are the herms of Greece, and possibly the Hellenic found around Europe. The herms are boundary guardians of a sort. They are pillars with busts atop them, often of the god Hermes, thus the name, with genitals carved at the appropriate height. These would be set at a crossing, borders, and in front of temples and houses. They could appear just about anywhere, and played part in one of the biggest scandals in Athenian history when the general Alcibiades was accused of knocking the penises off the herms before the ill-fated Sicilian expedition. When it comes to female genitalia, the Hellenic found throughout modern Spain, Ireland, and the UK, and Northern Europe are probably the most familiar to those of us who have read literature about the divine feminine. These are often images of women holding open their exaggerated vulvas, designed as architectural grotesques. Think of gargoyles on churches. Many of these seem to have been imported to Ireland and the UK through Spain and France and appear almost exclusively associated with Christian architecture. But there is some thought in academia that these are related to pagan survivals of the apotropaic power of genital display. After all, these may be examples of anisirma, or skirt lifting, where the genitals are exposed, which is another common apotropaic gesture. There's also a potential reflex found in the Ormhaxen stone, known as the snake witch stone. But it's worth noting that while the figure's legs are spread, genitals are not at all prominent on this relief, and we're not actually sure it's a woman either. Still, it's a neat picture stone to look at. Any of us who have ever been stuck in traffic are well aware of the apotropaic nature of gestures. Some of us may even have used them from time to time. But gesture is an ancient process of warding that is worth looking at. Ovid, when describing the Lemuria in the Fasti, says, "In the middle of the night lends silence to sleep, and all the birds and dogs are quiet. The worshipper who remembers the old rites and fears the gods arises. No knots ensnare his feet, and he makes a sign with his thumb between his closed fingers, in case an immaterial shade should meet him." There's also a casting of beans over the shoulder and a cleansing of hands, and the ghosts are commanded to leave the God-fearing person alone, and they do. Spitting was another method of warding against the evil eye. Pliny mentions in his Natural History, when a stranger enters the house, or when a person looks at an infant while asleep, it is usual for the nurse to spit 3 times, even though infants are under the divine protection of the god Fascinus. Spitting is still done today, warding off evils, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean, with parents spitting at a child when it is praised or a bride at a wedding. Yes, if you saw my big fat Greek wedding, that's exactly what those old aunts were doing as the bride walked down the aisle. We started by mentioning warding through symbols as a common Hollywood trope, but another common trope is the spoken charm. This is a long history, with ancient charms found in the Atharva Veda and more modern ones found in the Carmina Gadelica, and everywhere in between. In the Atharva Veda, there are charms against danger from fire, lightning, wild beasts and robbers, and envy. These are often a prayer to the thing to be avoided, or the specific god who holds sway over it. In the case of the lightning charm, it reads like this: "With broad thunder exalted, a sign of the gods that pervade all. With the lightning do not smite our grain, O God, nor destroy it with the rays of the sun." Many of the other charms are longer, but this short one illustrates the formula well. It calls out to the unnamed, yet obvious to the speaker, deity, who is praised and asked a specific request. In this case, to neither smite their grain with lightning, nor destroy it with the sun. In the Carmina Gadelica, there are a number of charms for protection and warding. Many clearly come from a tradition of Christianity, but some are also deeply pagan at their root. One charm, to be said while plucking the yarrow plant, calls out for protection. You speak this as you pick it: "I will pluck the yarrow fair, that more brave shall be my hand, that more warm shall be my lips, that more swift shall be my foot. May I be an island in the sea, may I a rock be on land, that I can affect any man, no man can affect me." Yarrow is a plant of healing, said to have been carried by Achilles to treat wounds in battle, by girls in the British Isles to divine their future husband, and also to cause second sight. In this case, its defensive nature is called on to let the holder work their will and not be worked on in turn. Now, with all these options, I get to craft a ritual, like I did for the other questions. In order to create the ritual, I have to decide what the purpose is, and in this case, it's not hard. The assignment is to take a warding practice and create a warding rite from that ancient practice. So that bit is done. Next, I want to think about my audience. How will people connect with this ritual? I'd like to create a ritual that anyone can do at home from wherever they are, which means it should be something simple, using normal tools they can obtain quickly and easy. So, thinking about what people have access to, I'll have to create a short list of items needed and craft a ritual that meets my ritual participants where they are. Then I'll need to provide instruction and a petitioning prayer, and guide them through it in the video that I'll be creating. Last time, I wrote the prayer first, but this time I'm crafting action before the prayer, as I'm working off of the directional working that I discussed first in this video. You recall that bit where the 4 Icelandic staves were carved into 4 directional sides of a piece of wood and carried? We'll be doing something similar. To keep it simple, though, we'll do just one side. The 3x3 warding working will look at that 4-dimensional template and make it a little bit more druidic. Druids like their multiples and 9s, so we're going to add to the template and craft a single sign that will work for us. I'll provide a template sign, but you can, of course, craft your own. I'm going to recommend a book for you to work from if you want some extra credit. Laura Tempest Zakroff's Sigil Witchery will provide some additional modern starting places to work from as you craft your own sigils and signs for this work. Chapter 2 is something like 60 pages of symbols and meaning and such, and it's totally worth checking out. Anyway, I worked my sigil based on the idea of protection and the fire, the well, and the tree in our rituals. It's a simple charm meant to be said and carved at the same time. Because I want to carve it quickly as I speak, the sigil cannot be complicated. I want the prayer to be simple and straightforward, something a person can remember. Unlike the healing rite, however, I have called this a 3x3 warding. It makes sense then that this might have more than the 4 simple lines that my healing working had. So, as I thought on it, I came up with something like this. Seeking my peace and protection for all. Fire, well, and tree, 3x3 I call. One in the heavens warmed by the sun, one where it sets when day is done, one where it rises over the hill, one in the waters, cooled by the chill. One where the waves meet crashing ashore, one where the spring flows, from whence blessings pour. One in the forest where animals play, one wizened tree, with the rest in the shade. One root and branch that grows mighty tall, 3x3 now, protected from all. If you learn nothing else from my examples, I hope that you learn that being a great poet is not at all required to do work that has meaning and power for you. As you speak the prayer, you can draw the symbol as you go. I'll provide some on-screen steps and encourage those following along to craft their own sigil during that work. Now, I want to wrap this up into a working that is an unmistakable ADF-style working. To do this, I want to provide some additional structure. Because this is a warding, I want it to be applicable and useful to the largest number of people possible. I don't think it would be too structured, and it should invite people to lean on their personal relationships with the spirits, rather than try and box them into working with someone else that they either don't know or aren't comfortable with. So to that end, I'll ask folks to visualize a spirit, known to them or unknown, who can connect with their needs and offer them a path toward protection. And then, once the rite is done, we'll offer to the spirit and thank them. So that's the basics of my ritual. And I hope that you'll find something to inspire you in the work as well. Pop over to the working video and see how it all came together. And of course, maybe get some warding yourself while you're at it. Thanks.